So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gents. My name is Grant Chisnell, and welcome along today to my first in the Crisis Leadership Series, which is talking about purpose and starting with your why and how that's important, particularly when you're looking at any situations that you may be confronted by as an organisation. Today's session is brought to you proudly by Noggin, who provide integrated incident management software that enables you to actually communicate with your teams across different organisational areas, also across different incidents in a response. And we've got a fantastic offer as part of that today. So look forward to talking a bit more about the platform and how that might be able to support you as well as you go through or dealing with your program, but importantly, then how you deal with any incident responses. So a quick overview on myself and a bit of background for me, at least anyway, as well. I'm a crisis advisor. I also have a podcast called Crisis Talks, and I'm the CEO of the business called Left of Boom. Now, our purpose is to ensure that executives and teams are well prepared and able to work proactively and confidently in any crisis situation. And so a lot of the work that we're doing with organisations is around preparing them for the worst case, and then ensuring that they are empowered to work through it proactively when they have to deal with those different situations. A lot of our work really brings together the key elements of crisis leadership, a bit of process and crisis management, and then importantly, how they work together and build trust between themselves and their teams so you can work together and resolve crisis situations. And more often than not, a crisis is really about people. And it's about people coming together to resolve different situations. So empowering people to respond is so crucial, and we found that as a crucial skill over the past 12 months. And that's probably why this podcast and this webinar has certainly been important. And when we're talking about purpose, I found that particularly with the response that we've had over the past 12 to 18 months, when the impossible happens or the seemingly impossible happens, that purpose makes anything possible. And it really resonated with me when I was looking back recently on the events over the past 12 months and the response that we've been through, whether it be the bushfire events, which ravaged the east coast of Australia and also impacted WA at different stages in South Australia. We worked through from there to impacts from COVID overseas, 2 global cyber attacks for another client, COVID here and the impacts locally, globally as well. And then following on from that, a number of other incidents, IT outages and product recall as well this year. So there's been a tremendous amount of focus on the impact on leadership teams and the skills required to really lead through uncertainty. So I thought it'd be really important to bring together some of those lessons and talk about the importance of crisis leadership now, because we now understand it is a real crucial skill when you're working together through any incident. And this quote here has resonated with me. It's something I've been writing as part of the book that I'm going to release later this year. And purpose really sort of brought it home to me when I was thinking and reflecting on Corporal Kieran and the Victoria Cross winner from Afghanistan. You can see behind me that I was an ex-military man and I was a former officer in the Army and the infantry as well. I never served in Afghanistan, but seeing and hearing Corporal Kieran's story of his Victoria Cross really brought home the importance of purpose and why it's been so crucial to defining the way that people operate in some of the most extreme circumstances. Now, for him and his patrol, they were certainly tied down by and ambushed by a larger force in Afghanistan. They were in a pretty heavy gunfight over there, and they were really struggling to identify the locations of the enemy and also to be able to respond and return fire and regain the momentum from the battle. And that was because they had the Afghanistani forces had a superior force which were working and directing very accurate fire on their teams. As the battle ensued, Lance Corporal Crash McKinney was wounded. It turned out to be mortally wounded, but at the time, that really brought the whole situation to a fore. You can imagine that these guys are pinned down from a number of different angles. And normally your battlefield procedure will kick in. You'll call for CASEVAC or medevac. A helicopter will generally come to start circling. You'll get air support to cover the troops on the ground. You then can get control of the situation, move the patient to an area, and then start to treat the patient in preparation for extraction. And in Afghanistan at the time, the golden hour was crucial. It was really crucial to saving lives and bringing people back to safety as quickly as possible in these situations. And getting them back to the primary level of medical care was really the focus of that response. But with this accurate fire directed on the team, in particular the team that were trying to secure Lance Corporal McKinney for transport, it meant that the whole CASEVAC was jeopardised. Amazingly, at that point in time, Corporal Kieran stepped forward out in the open on a number of occasions and drew the enemy fire in order to enable the team to secure Lance Corporal McKinney, move him to a safer area, provide better cover. But it also enabled his forces, Corporal Kieran's forces, to direct accurate fire in return back onto the enemy in their different locations. That enabled the area medevac to carry on, but importantly, from there, it also enabled him to regain the momentum in the battle, actually save the rest of his troops and the rest of the forces, remove them from that, withdraw safely from that area, from that contact. And unfortunately, Lance Corporal McKinney, although he lost his life in transit back, Corporal Kieran was able to save the lives of the rest of his patrol. Now, when you look back on those sort of moments, there was certainly no handbook or no series of SOPs or anything that said that when you're under fire like that you go and stand in front of the opposition and withdraw their fire. There's no guidebook that said that's what you need to do, or a leadership guide that said this is what you need to do when your patrol is under pressure or under direct threat. There was also, I can imagine if I was trying to give that order to one of my team at any stage in any battle, to tell them to go outside and stand out in the open to attract enemy fire, I'd be told in no uncertain terms where to go. So it certainly wasn't anything it was trained for or prepared for. But what it came back to was a higher purpose. And the higher purpose in this case, that he was there to try and save his mate. And that mateship was really a sacrosanct term with us within the military. We were always looking out for each other. We were always relying on each other. We always entrusted each other with our lives. And that mateship really carried through in everything that we did. No matter what the purpose or the mission that we're working on, that mateship was the higher purpose that really bonded us all together. And when I think about purpose now, in terms of the work that I'm doing now with organisations, that higher purpose is really that is really that defining factor which separates the amazing organisations from the good. And when the impossible happens, as we said here, purpose makes anything possible. So that resonated with me when I certainly saw the great TED talk by Simon Sinek, where he talks about the golden circle and how simple that whole model was. It was just amazing. It was a real eye-opener for me at the time. Hearing that and seeing that, it really sort of reinforced to me that the power of why really drives how and why people engage. And he kept on running the mantra, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So he kept on repeating that mantra throughout the whole presentation. And he talks about the fact that organisations that really talk about their why, they're the ones that are performing better, are adapting better to uncertain environments, and they're the ones that are moving seamlessly through changing and uncertain conditions. And when we've been dealing with that uncertainty over the past 12 months, and we're facing with that uncertainty going forward, it's important that we start to now really reflect on our why and what makes us so important, not just about what we do or how we do it, but more importantly, why we're doing it, because it defines the way that we respond also in crisis. Now, we are facing a changing environment like we've never seen before. The proliferation of social media, certainly the ascension of organisations such as QAnon or cancel culture, these sort of things are all really bringing to bear challenges for organisations that we've never seen before. We've seen the real spate of systemic issues that have really confronted corporates over the past 12 months. And traditionally, what we've been focused on with any risk program, with any sort of work that we're doing on a crisis management program, is we're focused on the operational risk. We're focused on what can happen. We're focused on how we respond to those circumstances. And more importantly now, we need to focus on the why. Because what happens in a crisis is the same as what Sinek says. Because people don't care about necessarily what you're doing or how you're doing it. They care about why you're doing it. And they care that you are demonstrating the actions that you're calling out as part of your behaviour in response to any emerging situation. So crucially, we must now ask ourselves why we're engaging with risk in the way that we are. How can we go about it in a better way to enable our organisations to respond more effectively and adapt to emerging situations? And importantly, what can we do to preempt, prepare, respond, and effectively recover from any of these situations? So that comes back to the why or the purpose of our programs. But importantly, in a crisis, it comes back to also the objective that we're setting in a crisis. And the objective is one of the first key things we talk about when you're activating a crisis team. And especially when you're dealing with an uncertain environment, it's often coming back to that purpose, especially when you're dealing with disparate teams, when you've got teams separated geographically or internationally, or where you're working with teams that are having to deal with really emerging threats very quickly in complex situations. That volatility, that uncertainty, that chaos that happens in any sort of situation really means that we need to have adaptive teams ready to respond seamlessly with minimal guidance, but connected by a central purpose. And in a crisis, that becomes the objective that you're setting. We want to have a response that's not chaotic or reactive, or not directive command and control anymore. Those days are gone. What we need is organisations that can be collaborative, proactive, and adapt seamlessly to emerging threats with confidence. And we've seen some great examples over the last number of years that have really defined some of the changes that have occurred around organisational response and also around organisational crisis response in particular. A great sort of image that was published in the AFR a number of years ago, which compared the two disasters, the two crisis situations, Samarco, the tailings dam failure over in Brazil, versus the Dreamworld fatalities that occurred here on our own soil. And the two differences in the responses were really crucial, because what we saw is that we had a really motivated and focused organisation that got straight on the front foot in the Samarco situation, despite it not being a cause of their own. So Vale was the operator of the mine. BHP Billiton at the time were an investor in that mine. They didn't operate that mine directly, but they, on the tailings dam failure occurring, they immediately responded, deployed over into country, got on the front foot with the local community and the media, all because the purpose for BHP at that time was about their social license to operate. So they knew that if at any time that social license to operate was undermined or lost, then that would threaten their ability to do any of the work that they do so well. So their why was really driven around the work that they're doing within the people and the communities within which they live and operate. And that became really apparent in the response from Andrew McKenzie, who got on the front foot, went over in country, despite some personal threat to that movement himself. Had some genuine and immediate concerns that were shown for the families of the people that were affected. And there were 19 fatalities directly as a result. A whole community dislocated from their primary residence and from their villages, et cetera, nearby. And they really did control that messaging all the way throughout by being proactive and engaged in the whole response. Versus Dreamworld, where we saw them trying to actually reopen the Dreamworld theme park within about 8 days. That actually pushed out to become a number of weeks. We saw then the commentary and the issues that they had, and they confronted with the fact that Deborah Thomas in the board meeting had claimed that they'd been on the front foot and spoken to the families when media doorstopped them and showed them that they actually hadn't been in touch with one of the families who was on the phone at the time. So all these things really get to the core of why and what your purpose is, and how you're ensuring that in any response that you're really true to that purpose, and that what you're doing is what you're saying, and how you are delivering that demonstrates the clear care that you're meant to be showing or should be showing for your people, for your environment, or for the affected assets that might have been part of your response or part of the impact. So what are the rules of engagement now? And you've probably seen another great example over the last 12 months with the Premier Dan Andrews here, the Commission of Inquiry into the hotel quarantine, and the results there impacting a number, only two key executives. One was his own Department of Premier and Cabinet lead, Jenny Mikalakos, who was the health minister at the time, and one of her department heads were the three heads that unfortunately rolled in that circumstance, versus the impact on Rio Tinto when we had the Juukan Gorge, the 40,000-year-old Indigenous heritage site that was blown up during last year. That led to the whole executive team for that particular part of the business, so the iron ore part of the business, as well as the CEO. So three key senior executives forced to resign, and then more recently, the chairman has announced his resignation with effect for 2022. So there is a different expectation out there on the different on organisational impacts in these crises versus what happens with political impacts. We're seeing the other rise of these issues that have occurred in Canberra, and how the government of the day is going to respond to those is going to be quite challenging for them, because the whole debate now is around what they're doing and why they've permitted these things to occur. So the acts of some of their staff now causes us all to question, rightly, why could these things have occurred, and what are you actually doing about changing or making meaningful change to address these issues. So there are, though, an expectation on corporate that are higher than the expectations on public office. And at the end of the day, what we still want from both is transparency, and we want timeliness of response. So that brings into question not just about what you're doing or how you're going about a response, but more and more now, people are asking, why did this occur? And you need to be prepared for that as an organisation as part of your crisis response. So getting to that why is so crucial when you're looking at your response to any crisis situation. And that's why your purpose becomes your objective in a crisis. So where do you start? Where do you start when you are looking at your purpose and looking at why you exist, or looking at your program and ensuring that you've got the right risk management principles in place? So you've got to ask yourself a question, what is your purpose? Why do you exist? And how does that affect then the way that you're interacting with your stakeholders? How does that affect the way that you're interacting with risk and engaging with risk? Are you out there doing a box ticking exercise for compliance? Or are you looking at it from a proactive and an adaptive point of view to the way that you deal with uncertainty, handle difficulty, and manage your way through any of the impossible situations you might be confronted by? So you've really got to ask yourself tough questions about how might we address this. And you've got to have a really good hard look at yourself to start with, to define why it is that you're really engaged in these programs of work. And at the end of the day, from a preparedness point of view, you need to make sure that that program is actually aligned with that risk profile, and that is actually aligned with why you're existing out there. Now, what I want to share with you is just some of the resources off the back of this. And at the end of this, what we'll do is be able to take some questions from the audience as we're going through. What we've got from a Left of Boom point of view is we're doing a lot of these reviews at the moment and supporting organisations to really drill into their why and ensure that your alignment exists between the risk profile that you are confronted by and the structure, the framework that you've got for response. And then importantly, we're really challenging and testing you to those failure points and making sure that out of that, you have the best possible structures in place to deal with any situation and can scale and deal with complexity and the concurrency of the issues that you get confronted by. So taking that deep dive really starts with looking at why, asking those tough questions of yourselves, and then ensuring that the alignment works from there. I'm happy to take a call from anyone post this webinar to talk through some of the challenges that can present, and then also some of the opportunities that you can look at to bring that to bear for yourselves and within your own program. But at the end of the day, what we're looking at building here is that trust between yourselves, trust in your process, and trust in your teams in any response, so that you're empowered and able to respond proactively and with confidence to any situation you might be confronted by. So it doesn't have to be a crisis situation. It can just be the way that you're dealing with your day-to-day, the BAU. And without a doubt, crisis leadership has become a BAU skill. It's important for all leaders. Last but not least, there's a part of the introduction for the webinar series, you've got exclusive access to Noggin's COVID-19 module. If you go to www.noggin.io/crisis talks, and you'll be able to punch in the details there, and you get free access to that as part of the sponsorship for this particular webinar series. So take that offer up if you can. It's an amazing offer, an amazing solution, and it brings together some of the different sort of components around the way that you're managing risk into a really coherent platform that you can use to give yourself the right situational awareness in any emerging crisis event. And lastly, but not least, we've got the podcast Crisis Talks. Series 3 is up and racing again this year, and the first few episodes are dedicated towards the BP Gulf of Mexico oil spill and the response there. I've also got the Adaptive Leadership blog. We're going to send out a newsletter to everyone over the coming week. And in there will be some other resources and access to the next webinar, which is on Friday, the 9th of April at 1:30 p.m. And that's going to be Black Swans of Bullshit, where we're really digging into the way that you can preempt crisis situations, look at the risks and the relevance to you, and ensure you've got the right scale teams and structures in place to deal with any situation. So we're debunking some of the myths around black swans. So that concludes the webinar for today, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today on this series. Look forward to having you on board for the next series.